Okay. Got my notes. We're going to talk about Westworld. Hopefully I'm loud enough this time. There's no fan on this time like there was in my Nintendo video. So for once, I might have gotten everything correct. So this was a big episode for a number of reasons. Even though it seemed like there were a lot of storylines going on, in fact, it really only had two things going on, which were Maeve and her search for answers. She was constantly remembering things, and moving several characters, either starting some characters on the path to the maze and moving others even closer. The episode opens with Bernard setting Dolores on the path to the maze, telling her that if she reaches the center, then she'll be free. Freedom in the sense of being a host is an interesting concept. Makes you wonder what they mean by that. Like, are they no longer a part of Westworld? Are they self-aware of what they are at that point? Are they just killed? Like, but no longer sent through their constant lives and so forth? Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what he means by freedom, because that's what he tells Dolores, but at the same time, the Man in Black believes the maze to be the only place with actual stakes within Westworld, which sort of backs up my assumption from the first episode that maybe the maze was a place where guests could die. That it was sort of the only place that you could, after you've explored everything else, that you could still feel something. Throughout his storyline, the Man in Black mentions Arnold a few times, and it makes it seem like he's the one who crafted the maze. And since Arnold was obsessed with consciousness and getting the hosts to reach their full potential as human beings, I wonder if that relates to the idea of freedom that Bernard was talking about. But it's interesting because we seemed to be originally on something of a collision course between Dolores' storyline and the Man in Black storyline as they headed towards the maze. And even though it might not seem like it, we're getting more and more hints that things are more interconnected than we were led to believe. So a lot of his storyline, the Man in Black's storyline in this episode, had to do with the woman called Armistice, who was actually in the very first episode. She was Hector's partner, who I didn't realize until the very end of this episode when she played the same role, because she was all bundled up and everything. There's no way to see her snake tattoo. But she mentions her backstory and then ties it directly into Wyatt, who from last week's episode we know is also the major player in Teddy's backstory. So we had Teddy go after Wyatt before, and he was found at the end of this episode hung and bleeding and left for the birds to pick off. But it sounds like defeating Wyatt, who's now a new piece of the puzzle that was introduced by Ford in last week's episode, is a major part of the maze, or Wyatt was always there and Ford is just steadily tying all these people to Wyatt as a way to make getting to the maze a bit clearer. It's not necessarily clear exactly what the relation is between all these characters, and I guess that's perhaps the point. Let's see here. There was an interesting scene with Dolores when she meets the little girl who knows about the maze. She showed Dolores the blueprint of the maze, the same drawing that was on the scalp of the man in Black has. And that triggered a bunch of flashbacks. I don't know if those are about like the early interpretations of the park, earlier storylines, or whatever they are, they're buried memories about how things used to be. It looked like they took place in a church. But besides that, I'm not entirely sure what relation they have to the maze or Dolores' storyline here. Let's see here. So besides the Man in Black stuff, there was Maeve, and she was furthering her search for answers, because not only did she remember the time that she woke up after being worked on because she had an infection, she started to remember the other time she woke up when she had been shot. And the workers didn't have time to pull the bullet out because there was a rush on getting her back into the park. So she still had it in her, and she knew she still had it in her, but she thought she was sure, at least. And she kept having flashes about the lab workers and stuff in their full, like, CDC looking decontamination gear and stuff like that, and realized that she had remembered this person several times. These lab workers. She had drawings upon drawings hidden under her room, under the floorboards of these lab workers. The more interesting aspect involving the lab workers was that the Native Americans in the story seemed to look at the lab workers as a religious figure. They even have dolls crafted of them that are almost exact replicas of how these people are dressed. And I can't help but wonder why the park allows them to do that. I mean, maybe they feel that giving them some sense of creation and where they came from helps further that sort of Native American storyline involving spirituality or something, but it, at some point you have to wonder exactly how much they know about what is going on. And so, in the end, she did get answers. She did pull the bullet out. She did confirm her suspicions that she was shot. Hector also was the one that helped her through extracting the bullet. Well, he was there for it, didn't exactly help her with it. And then they both got shot at the end because the park crew sent in the marshals who take care of the bandits at the end of the big gunfight. It's just how it is. So whether or not Hector remembers at the end is something I'm not sure of. Maeve will more than likely remember because that just seems to be what she does. And so even though we're only 4 episodes in of what I believe to be a 10-episode season, we're making some headway. And my assumption is that by the end of the first season, we'll have a general idea of what the maze actually is, and perhaps what Ford's overall goal is. Because even though he only had one big scene here, it sort of shed a light on who he is as a person. We kind of understood from the previous episode that he didn't really care about the hosts as people, but he does care about them as his subjects. He has complete and total control over the park. I mean, he froze everyone in his vicinity with the wave of a finger. And he knows everything about hosts, everything that's going on in the park, everything that is going on with his employees. And it gives this somewhat sinister quality to him, and it makes you wonder, does he actually know what's going on with people like Dolores? Does he know about Dolores' conversations with Bernard? And if he does, is he okay with Dolores now being led on the path to the maze? And does he understand that the man in black is headed towards the maze? Judging by how that scene played out, you would think, yes, he does know about all this. And if he does, is this all part of a plan for her that he has? Or is he just okay with letting it happen because it fits a larger goal of his own? There were a couple other interesting notes, but those are really the big ones. So I think that I will call things there, because that just about covers all the big stuff. I'm going to try and get these up more on time. I know last week's episode recap was 2 days late. This will be a day late. Gonna try and shrink that gap. But yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me better this time. I know there's a little bit of fan noise in the back, but that's just how it is. That fan is off right now. Trying to speak up. So let me know. Let me know if things are better.